Hello everyone. Today I have another video where I'm using my markers to create a copy of a photograph. This one is Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, and yeah, I'll just talk about how I did it. I started on the background after sketching. I used my grid method as usual. There is a video showing how I do that, and I just used some Promarkers and some Copics. I used B14 in Copic, and I used Icicle, Polar Blue and Cool Aqua in my Promarkers. Two of those are limited edition colours, so there will be probably equivalents in the normal colour range that you could probably use, because there's not too much difference between those. I then started on his face, as you can see here. So I did a base coat of, I think it was champagne. Yeah, I think it was the champagne colour. Usually I'd use my light fawn, but it has dried up now and I can't seem to find a replacement for some reason, because Winsor & Newton have now taken over the Letraset brand, so I don't know if they've stopped making that colour or if they've made it into a new, they've got a new name for that colour, and I just don't know what it is. So if anyone knows what the name for light fawn is in the Winsor & Newton colours, please let me know, because I really need that colour back. So yeah, I started off with a very, just a quick layer of this champagne colour, and then I went over that layer again just to darken it up in certain areas, just like where there's going to be shadowing, so around his eyes, around the edge of his face where his beard and his hair covers and shadows, and also around his nose and his moustache area. I then just smoothed it out with my colourless blender. I just wanted to do a base coat and everything. I was just doing it a bit differently this time. So for his lips, I used a Copic Chow marker of R00, just to give a very, very light skin kind of pinky tone to his lips. And then I did a cool grey all the way over his hair and where his kind of fluffy jacket's going to be. I started darkening this up with sandstone, because his face in the photo is very, very pale, but I kind of wanted him to give this rustic look, so I gave him more of an orangey colour, and it's not even just that, I just genuinely don't have a lot of colours at the moment, so this has to kind of do me just substituting colours and making the skin tone a little bit different. So I apologise if that's not to anyone's liking. For the shadowing, like I say, a lot of my markers have dried up, and I cannot afford new markers at the moment. So I used a warm grey 7 by Copic, just to create the dark lines. And then what I would do is I would get the champagne Flexmarker, and I would just blend that out and soften it a little bit so it's not as harsh a colour against the light skin tone. So I would just soften it and blend it, and this is how I start to get my shadowing and darker colours under his eye and around his nose, and then elsewhere later on. So I just keep doing this. I just layer it, and if I don't like it, then I use the marker to kind of take off the dark colour whilst also spreading it to create more shadowing, and I just keep doing this until I'm really, really happy with how I've got it. And this will go through a lot of ugly stages. It really, really does. It's very hard to get things to look right straight away, because obviously you'll see a point where I finish most of his face, all his shading and everything, except I haven't put his eyebrows or his moustache and beard on. I actually put a photo up on Instagram, and he looked very strange. He looked like almost a painting from the Victorian era. It was very strange. So yeah, I do the same with his eyes. When I looked at this, when I finished it, I thought, right, this looks good, and then I compare it to the photograph that I was taking it from, and I actually realised that I have actually adapted this quite a bit. It does not look like the original at all, and so he has more of a worried look, and yeah, he just doesn't have the same expression as the photograph, but I do think it represents Jon Snow still. Like, you can still kind of tell it is Jon Snow. Also, what tends to happen with me is I will print out the photo, so I don't have to keep getting up on my laptop or my iPad or something like that, and I print it out, and my printer is so bad that it will darken it, and so I'm copying it thinking I'm doing it correctly, and then I will look at the original on my computer and notice that it is not that dark at all. In fact, most of the time it's a lot lighter, and so my interpretation always comes across very, very different. But I suppose that's, I don't want to always be copying everything 100%. I want it to be a little bit different, so that's how it always turns out. I can't think of anything to say until I move on to something else. Until I move on to something else. I'll pipe in when some other things happen. In a second you will see a few parts where I accidentally darken them a little bit too much, and then with that very dried up light fawn marker I actually dab off some of the ink. Because I'm working on canvas paper, the ink stays wet for a very long time. This is why sometimes you want to be careful you don't smudge it with your hand across the page, but I do take off some of that with a dry marker, so it's always worth keeping your dry markers. That's why I always have them. But then again, sometimes I'll start working on something like this and think, oh, I've got this colour, try and use it, and then I don't have this colour, so maybe put them in a separate pot, because that's what I need to kind of do. Okay, so moving on to his lips a little bit more, I used a sun-kissed pink in Promarker. I do have it in Flexmarker, but that one's dried up as well, so I used my Promarker sun-kissed pink, and I filled it in, and then his lips go through a lot of very feminine stages, very pointy, almost like he's got like a lip liner on. So it takes me a while to kind of soften it, whilst also adding these darker, darker shading between his lips, and like the little lip crinkles you get. So I had to do this and just keep blending it out and adding the sun-kissed pink, and then I add a little bit of the skin tone as well, just to blend it in, because I don't want them to stand out very much. Also, whilst I'm filming, especially if it's gone dark at night time, I do have my lamp over me so it brightens up, so it's not so shaded when I'm putting my hand over it. But this can cause the shininess from the alcohol on the canvas paper to reflect, so that's why you see a lot of white dots. That's not because I haven't filled in the canvas paper, that's purely because of the reflection of some of the areas. Again, you'll see me use my finger, and I've mentioned this in other videos, because the ink stays wet, I can afford to use my finger to blend, because the nibs on these pens can cause streakiness, so I find my finger just allows it to kind of blend a bit more smoothly, and this probably goes against any art teacher's kind of advice, because I remember my art teacher always told me never to blend with my finger, but do you know what, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it how I want to do it, and this is how I end up doing it. So okay, so I start moving on to the hair on his right side, well, his left side, our right side, and all I basically do, I did start with a warm grey 9 in Copics, but I found that it wasn't standing out enough, so I ended up using a black in Copics, and at first I used 110, which is special black or something like that, but it's just not quite black enough. It's kind of a bit patchy, it dries very dull, so I moved on to 100, black 100 in Copics, just to do that. And what I did was I looked at my reference photo very closely, and I tried to leave white gaps where I thought the hair, you know, has highlights in. So I left little white gaps, and also with the little wisps that you can see, I just used the brush tip to the Copic to put very thin and thick lines in there. And a little later on at the end, I actually go in with one of my black Promarkers with an ultra fine nib attached to it, just to get those extra fine kind of wispy strokes to his hair. I don't know if this recorder is picking up on any of this, but I do apologise if you hear any banging or talking or crashing or anything. My new apartment is next to kind of like a building site, so you will hear that occasionally, so sorry about that. I didn't want to skip too much out of this because I wanted to show you every single process. I think that little skip that was in the hair was an accident. I don't know, I think I might have lost a bit of footage there. Anyway, I actually use a marker that I only have this colour in. I have a Curacolor marker for graphic. It's a Zig brand in cool grey. Where is it gone? Cool grey. I don't think it has a name. Anyway, I think it's cool grey 6. There we go. And I just use this with my black to kind of make the very faded look to his jacket, and very fluffy. So it needs to kind of be fluffy and faded almost. Yeah, I alter that a little bit more at a later date. Time, should we say? Okay, so this is me adding his eyebrows in, and I actually used the brush nib to the black. Oh no, I think it was the warm grey 9 because it's very dark. That is almost black. I used the brush nib. Excuse me. The brush nib to that to create the very, very thin strokes. And you have to hold it very close to the nib to get those ultra fine, because you can't put any pressure on because it will put thicker lines on there. And then I softened it by just dabbing a little bit of the champagne Flexmarker over the eyebrow. Just softens it, and then I go over it again just to darken up a couple extra lines. I don't know why I left one eyebrow and did one, but I did you see me there adding the little foreground wisp of hair in front of him on his right cheek. And this is me doing his other eyebrow here. I think the eyebrows are what made him, as well as the eyes obviously, made him have that very furrowed brow kind of look about him, but yeah, and they're very full, aren't they? They're very full eyebrows. On the photo he does have very full eyebrows, but I think I might have filled in his right eye, the left eye that we see, looking this direction at him. I think I might have filled that in a little bit too much, which is a shame, but yes, yeah. So here's me using the ultra fine nib on my black Promarker here, just to add the extra little wispy lines that I couldn't really get with the brush nib on the Copic. And again, like I said, this is me adding the little wisps kind of just coming out from his head a little bit on that side. And I think the rest of the video is me just adding, doing his other side of his hair, and this is me just adding his little cuts. And I never noticed until I started doing this that he has actual kind of reflections of his cuts. It's kind of weird. I don't know why it has 4 exactly in a square there, but that's how it looks. Yeah, so I'll talk again after I finish the rest of his hair, which I did the same process as I did the other side. Okay, so finished his hair now, and I've just finished the rest of his coat as well. So this is clean shaven Jon Snow, if anyone was wondering. No, he looks kind of silly, doesn't he? Yes, so this is me just adding those little wisps again, which I think really pull it together, because the hair obviously is always going to have wispy bits, so this is how I thought it looked anyway. That's me discovering that I had a lot more colours to work with than I actually thought. Okay, so I'm using my Sunkissed Pink again just to add the little pinky areas to his eyes, and I'm just smoothing over some of the parts, and yeah. So here I struggled because I do have an umber colour in my Promarkers that I usually use to do kind of like the base coat for like men's beards and moustaches with an ultrafine nib, because it's a very dark, almost black colour, but it seemed to be coming out very pinky at this point. So I used one of my other colours. Let me see if I can find it. I used Henna instead, which, as you can see, is very, very orange and red kind of colour. I regret using it, but it does create kind of like a more natural look to it, because you're not just going to have black hair, you're going to have little different colours running through it, especially kind of like a gingery colour. Men seem to always have kind of gingery beards going through, so I basically used this just to map out where I was going to put his beard hairs and everything, because sometimes I really worry putting black straight onto there in case I make a mistake, because that's a lot harder to rectify than it is to rectify this colour. So yeah, I just put a base layer of those down, and then this is how, when I start working in with that black, just to add all his moustache hair. And a few areas where I may have overdone it, and a few areas where I've underdone it, and I just keep rectifying this until I'm happy with it. that's why I come in with that dark colour there, because a lot of his beard and moustache is very black, like you can only see the edges really where there's fine detail. So I just use that, and then I smudge it out almost with that champagne colour, just to, you know, just to create those shading areas. Yeah, and then I just go over again with my ultrafine nib black just to create the rest of his hairs. The definition on his lip I have softened just before recording this, actually, because I didn't like how defined his lip was, because in the photograph he does have his lips kind of just blend into his skin. I've always had trouble with lips, I really need to work on that. I might do kind of like a lip study. So I come in here with my Uni Posca. I think this is the ultrafine nib on the Uni Posca. I just do kind of like the highlights on his eyes, and where you can see the highlights on his hair, I do it and it looks very rough. And if anyone's watched my Norman Reedus, Daryl Dixon, my first ever video on this channel, I do the same process on that. And again, all I do is I use that on the hair, and then I'll show you what I'll do next. And then I used a Uniball Signo white gel pen, which I just got recently in my scroller box. And I use this to get the other fine details, like on his moustache and stuff, which don't require to be that dark, they just need to be a little bit showing, so a few of his hairs on his moustache and his beard kind of show up. I then I just went over with his hair with that very thick Cool Grey 6, again just to go over some of the dark patches on his hair there, because once that Uni Posca paint dries, you can go over it and it kind of just covers it but blends it out a little bit, so it kind of looks like highlights more. Here I'm using the pen and I'm smudging it with my finger to create that very blurred look that you can see in the reference photo. And I'm just adding the darker parts and adding a bit more detail into that. Yeah. So I think that's it, other than little touch-ups you'll see me do. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me a thumbs up if you did. Yeah, so subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, or to suggest more characters that you want me to do. Just give me a comment. So thank you for watching. Bye. I think the feathers look nice how they were. As I'm lining the little circles of the feathers now, but I didn't actually end up liking that, so I do go over those afterwards. See, with this it wasn't so much as